The research vessel Pathfinder had been humanity's greatest achievement. For 3 years, it traveled through space carrying the brightest minds Earth had to offer. They were on a simple mission: to find new worlds, to study alien life, to bring back knowledge. None of them expected to never come home. Captain Michael Torres stood in the bridge watching his ship die. Red lights flashed everywhere. The alarms sounded like screams. He gripped the controls so hard his knuckles turned white, but nothing he did mattered anymore. The Viridian Collective had made their decision about humanity months ago, and now they were making it final. The Viridians were beings of pure logic. They had been watching humans for decades from the shadows of space, studying us like scientists study insects. They saw our wars, our chaos, our emotions. They saw humans killing each other over ideas and land and pride. They decided we were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too broken to ever join their peaceful galactic community. So they came to the Pathfinder and they didn't ask permission. They simply shut down the engines and let gravity do the rest. Michael knew what was about to happen. He keyed the communication system one last time, sending a message to Earth that would arrive long after his death. "This is Captain Torres. We are going down. Tell our families we tried our best. Tell humanity we were proud to represent you." Then he turned to his crew. "Get everyone to the evacuation pods. Now." Below the bridge, Dr. Elena Hayes was moving through the ship like a woman running from fire. In some ways she was. The ship was tearing itself apart as it fell through the planet's atmosphere. Metal groaned and twisted. Sparks shot from damaged wires. The temperature rose with every passing second. Elena had been the Pathfinder's chief medical officer for 3 years. She was used to saving lives, treating injuries, performing surgeries, delivering babies born in space. But she had never experienced anything like this. Her training meant nothing when an entire ship was falling from the sky. She ran to the children's quarters, where the youngest members of the crew were waiting. There were only 2 infants on board. One was a little girl named Rebecca, 3 years old. The other was a boy just 6 months old. His name was James. He had been born during the mission to a scientist named Linda. She loved him more than anything in the world. Elena moved quickly, strapping the children into the evacuation pods. These weren't big ships. They were small survival capsules designed to protect people during crashes. They weren't guaranteed to work. Nothing was guaranteed anymore. But they were the only chance these children had. "It's okay," Elena whispered to baby James as she secured the straps around his tiny body. "You're going to be okay. Your mother is waiting for you. Your whole family is waiting." She didn't know if this was true. She didn't know if anyone would survive this day. The pod containing James had been damaged earlier in the mission during a routine maintenance check. The engineers had tried to fix it, but there were only so many hours in a day. The repair was marked as pending. It sat on a list of things that would be done later. But later never came. Elena didn't know about the damage as she rushed through the smoking corridors. She had no way of knowing that this particular pod's emergency systems were faulty. She had no way of knowing that when the Viridian beam activated the evacuation sequence, this one capsule would remain inactive. Her mind was filled with too much panic, too much fear, too many voices calling for help at once. The Viridian ship hovered above the Pathfinder like a great mechanical god. A beam of blue light touched the evacuation pods and lifted them upward. Elena watched from a window as the pods ascended into the alien vessel. She counted them as they went up. She thought she saw them all. She was wrong. The pod containing baby James remained on the falling ship. It fell with the Pathfinder through layers of atmosphere. The descent was violent and terrible. The ship broke apart, spreading pieces of metal and human dreams across the alien sky. And then, after what felt like forever, there was silence. Hours passed in darkness. The pod's backup power system slowly came to life. The circuits that had been damaged during that repair attempt suddenly found their way through an alternate pathway. Emergency lights flickered on. Heating systems began to warm the cold interior. And then the pod's sensors detected something, a living infant. The systems worked slowly and imperfectly to revive the child. Oxygen began flowing. Protective gel that cushioned the baby through the crash started to recede. And after hours of silence and darkness, a small cry echoed through the metal chamber. Baby James opened his eyes to an empty sky. He was alone on a strange world in a broken machine with no one to hear his cries. His mother was gone. His ship was destroyed. His entire species was somewhere far above, unreachable and unaware that he was alive. The infant didn't understand any of this. He only knew that he was cold and hungry and alone. So he cried. And somewhere in the mountains beyond the wreckage, something heard him. The sky above the crash site was empty and cold. Nothing moved for hours after the explosion. The alien world was used to silence. Vast mountains stretched for hundreds of miles, covered in forests of purple trees and strange vegetation that no human had ever seen before. The ruins of the Pathfinder sat smoking in a canyon, a monument to a species that had tried to reach the stars and fallen instead. Then something changed in the air. A shadow appeared first, moving across the ground like a cloud passing in front of the sun. But it was too big to be a cloud. It was too dark. As it grew closer, the sound came with it, a sound like wind being pushed through a tunnel by something enormous. The beating of wings, ancient and powerful, echoed through the canyon. The dragon descended slowly, circling the wreckage below. His name was Kale, and he had ruled these mountains for over 200 years. He was one of the last of his kind, part of the Arathian clan that had lived on this world since before recorded time. His scales were black as midnight, reflecting light like polished obsidian. His eyes were the color of amber, old, intelligent, and filled with the weight of centuries. Kale had never seen a human before. He had heard stories, passed down through dragon generations. Humans were creatures from distant worlds, small and weak, known for their violence and their greed. The dragons had learned long ago to avoid other species. It was safer that way. Safer and cleaner. But something was different today. As Kale circled lower, moving his massive body through the air with surprising grace for something so large, he heard it. A sound so small it should have been impossible for him to detect. A cry. The cry of something suffering. The cry of something dying. Kale's first instinct was to ignore it. He had heard many creatures die over 200 years. Death was part of nature. It meant nothing. But his wings carried him lower anyway, drawn by something he couldn't explain. His claws scraped against the metal of the broken ship as he landed, his tail knocking aside pieces of debris that weighed as much as houses. That's when he saw the pod. It was small, no bigger than the egg he had once hatched from. The metal was scorched and cracked, but the front window was clear enough to see inside. And there, wrapped in cushioning material, was a tiny creature. A human infant. Its skin was pale, almost translucent. Its fists were clenched. And its mouth was open, screaming into the silence of an alien world. Kale stared at it for what felt like a long time. He could kill it with a single claw. He could crush the pod and return to his mountains, pretending he had never heard that sound. That was what any dragon would do. That was what made sense. But something in Kale's heart was breaking open. Maybe it was because he was the last of his kind. Maybe it was because he understood what it meant to be alone. Whatever the reason, Kale did something no dragon had done in living memory. He was gentle. His claws, designed to tear through armor and stone, carefully opened the pod. His breath, normally hot enough to melt metal, he kept soft and warm. And he lifted the tiny human child as if it were made of spun glass. The infant's crying stopped. The small creature looked up at the dragon towering above it, and something passed between them. An understanding that transcended species, an acknowledgement of one lonely being recognizing another. Kale carried James to the mountain sanctuary. His home was carved into the highest peak, a series of caves and chambers where the Arathian clan lived. It was warm and protected, filled with the comfort of stone and fire and family. This was where dragon eggs were kept. This was where baby dragons learned to fly. "What have you brought us?" his mother asked, her voice dripping with danger. Her name was Ravenwing, and she was the oldest dragon in the clan. She had lived through wars and famines. She had seen other species rise and fall. She knew the dangers of the world better than anyone. A child, Kale said simply. He was alone. He would have died. Of course he would have died, Ravenwing hissed. He is human. Humans die. Humans always die. And they take others with them when they fall. No, Kale said, and there was something in his voice that made even his mother pause. His name is James. And I will raise him. The clan argued about this decision. The other dragons wanted to kill the human child. They said it was dangerous, that it would grow to be something terrible, that keeping it was foolish. But Kale stood firm. His mother, after watching her son's determination, finally nodded. The decision was made. For 15 years, James grew up in the mountains. He learned to climb where humans shouldn't be able to climb. He learned the dragon language, not with his voice which couldn't make those sounds but with his body, his breath, his understanding. The dragons taught him about honor and loyalty. They taught him about pain and survival. They taught him about family. By the time James became a man, nobody could tell if he was human or dragon anymore. He moved like them. He thought like them. He dreamed like them. But he was still human. And that made him something the world had never seen before, something dangerous, something new, something unstoppable. The first warning came on a clear morning when the sky turned red. James was hunting with a group of younger dragons when they saw it, a light descending from the clouds, bright and terrible. It moved too fast to follow. It moved with perfect precision. The moment it touched the ground miles away, a mountain erupted. Not from a volcano. From energy. Pure, concentrated energy that vaporized rock and earth like they were made of smoke. What was that? James asked, his voice tight with fear. Cale circled higher, his amber eyes narrowing. I don't know. But it means nothing good. Within days more lights came. They appeared in different parts of the world, each one leaving destruction in its wake. The dragons tried to understand what they were fighting. They were machines, that much was clear. Metal and wire and something that glowed with electric light. But they weren't alive. They didn't breathe. They didn't feel pain. They didn't fear death because death meant nothing to them. The machines had been left behind by the Viridians hundreds of years ago. They were terraforming constructs, designed to reshape worlds to suit different life forms. But something had gone wrong. A virus or a programming error or maybe just the chaos of time itself had corrupted them. Now they operated with a single purpose: destroy all organic life on the planet and restart the terraforming process from zero. The first real battle came when 3 machines attacked the southern dragon roosts. The dragons flew at them with everything they had. Their fire was legendary, hot enough to melt stone. Their teeth and claws could tear through anything nature had created. But the machines had plasma cannons. They had shields that reflected heat. They had weapons that calculated angles and trajectories with perfect mathematical precision. 30 dragons died in that first battle. Cale fought harder than any of them. He was the strongest dragon in the clan, the leader, the one who had always protected his family. But he couldn't protect them from this. His fire hit the machines and bounced off their shields. His claws scratched their armor without penetrating it. His intelligence, vast and deep and earned through 2 centuries of living, meant nothing against an enemy that could predict his every move. An energy blast caught Cale across his left side. The wound was massive. His scales, normally impenetrable, were burned away. The flesh beneath was charred and smoking. He crashed to the ground, and the other dragons had to carry him away from the battle before the machines could finish him. For 3 weeks, Cale lay in the sanctuary barely alive. The dragon healers did everything they could, but the wounds wouldn't close. Infection set in. His breathing became labored. His eyes, those brilliant amber eyes that had seen 2 centuries of sunrises, started to dim. It was on the worst night, when everyone thought he would die before morning, that James came to him. James had grown into a tall man, lean and strong from years of climbing mountains and training with dragons. His skin was weathered from the sun. His eyes were sharp and intelligent. He looked human, obviously, but there was something different about him too. He moved like a dragon. He carried himself with a dragon's pride. He knelt beside Cale and placed his hand on his brother's neck. Cale's eyes opened slightly, recognizing him. "Don't," Cale whispered, his voice weak. "Don't do anything foolish, James. We cannot win. Not against this. You should leave. Take the young ones and fly far from here." James shook his head slowly. "No. I'm not leaving you. I'm not leaving any of them. You are human," Cale said. "You could survive this. You could return to your own kind." "My own kind?" James looked away for a moment. "My own kind left me to die as a baby. You saved me. You raised me. You're my family. All of you are. And I won't abandon my family." James stood up and walked to the edge of the sanctuary. He looked out over the mountains at the fires burning in the distance where more dragons were dying. He thought about everything the dragons had taught him. Honor, loyalty, strength. But he also thought about everything they didn't understand. He thought about the human part of himself that they had never really needed. Humans weren't the strongest creatures in the galaxy. Humans weren't the fastest or the toughest. But humans were something else. Humans could think sideways when the world demanded straight lines. Humans could break rules and invent new ones. Humans could lie, steal, cheat, and manipulate. Humans could see a problem and solve it in ways that made no logical sense but somehow worked anyway. The dragons fought with honor because honor was part of their nature. But these machines didn't understand honor. They understood mathematics. They understood patterns. They understood logic. And James understood something the machines couldn't: the beautiful chaos of human improvisation. He turned back to Cale, and his brother could see the change in his eyes. Something had shifted. Something had awakened. "I can't fight them the way you do," James said quietly. "But I can fight them the way I do. Let me try, Cale. Please, let me fight." Cale looked at his human brother for a long moment. Then, with great effort, he nodded. Go, he whispered. Show us what humanity is truly capable of. James left the sanctuary that night and everything changed. James spent the first 2 weeks studying the machines. Not fighting them. Watching them. Learning them. While the dragons continued their losing battles, James climbed to high peaks and observed every movement the constructs made. He noticed patterns. He noticed the way they calculated trajectories. He noticed that they always followed the most logical path to destroy their targets. That was their weakness. They were too logical. They were too perfect. The first time James struck, he didn't fight the machines directly. Instead, he found one of the abandoned Viridian outposts buried beneath the mountains. The technology was ancient but still functional. It took him 3 days of work, using human hands and human improvisation, to reprogram one of the old defense systems. He aimed it at a machine that was attacking a group of dragon refugees. The machine calculated the incoming attack and moved to dodge it. But James had already predicted where it would move. The weapon fired not at where the machine was but where it would be. The blast caught the construct mid-maneuver, sending it crashing into a cliff face. For the first time since the plague began, a machine was destroyed. But James didn't stop there. He understood something that the machines, for all their processing power, could never understand. Unpredictability was a weapon. Humans had survived in a dangerous universe not through raw strength, but through the ability to do the unexpected. To break patterns. To think sideways when the world demanded straight lines. James began to move across the planet like a ghost. He would appear in one location, destroy a machine with some clever trap, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. He used the terrain in ways the machines didn't anticipate. He buried explosives in caves and triggered them at precisely the right moment. He used mirrors and reflected light to confuse their targeting systems. He set traps within traps. Layers of deception that made no logical sense but worked anyway because the machines couldn't imagine something so deliberately illogical. Then he did something revolutionary. He hacked into 2 machines and made them attack each other. It seemed simple in concept, but the execution was brilliant. James found the communication frequency the machines used to coordinate with each other. He didn't try to break it or shut it down. Instead, he fed it false information. He told one machine that another was malfunctioning. He told the second machine that the first was a threat to the mission. The machines, operating on pure logic, believed the data they received. They attacked each other with the same ruthless efficiency they used against biological life. When they collided, they didn't hold back. 2 machines of immense power, each believing the other was an enemy, tore each other apart. The dragons watched in amazement as James turned the tide of war. What was even more amazing was that he wasn't using strength or honor or any of the traditional weapons of war. He was using tricks. He was using lies. He was using things the dragons had been taught were dishonorable and wrong. And it was working. Word spread across the planet like wildfire. There was a human, a young man raised by dragons, who was actually winning against the machines. Stories grew with each telling. Some said he was the son of a god. Some said he had been sent by the stars themselves to save the world. Whatever people believed, the result was the same: hope. Other species began emerging from their hiding places. The Casthir, a race of insectoid beings who lived underground, sent representatives to find James. The Stellar-born, beings of pure energy who lived in the upper atmosphere, descended from the clouds. Even the ancient Torvin, a species so old that nobody remembered where they came from, sent word that they would listen to what this human had to say. They all wanted the same thing: an alliance with the human who was actually winning. James didn't see himself as special. He was just doing what humans did. He was solving problems creatively. He was thinking about what the enemy expected and doing the opposite. He was adapting and changing his strategies every single day because the machines were adapting too. It was an evolution of warfare, and humans had been doing it since the beginning of their species. But to the dragons and the other alien races, it was revolutionary. More machines fell. James trained other warriors, both dragons and members of other species, in his tactics. He taught them that strength wasn't everything. He taught them that the most powerful weapon sometimes wasn't a weapon at all, but an idea. A strategy. A way of thinking that embraced chaos instead of fearing it. The machines had been designed by a logical species for a logical purpose. They couldn't adapt to someone who thought the way humans thought. They couldn't predict behavior that seemed to have no pattern. They couldn't defend against an enemy who would sacrifice a battle to win the war, or give up an advantage to set a trap 3 moves in the future. Within 6 months, half the machines were destroyed. Within a year, they were nearly extinct. And James, the forgotten human child, had become something the galaxy had never seen before. He was a legend. He was proof that humanity, the species the Viridians had written off as too dangerous and too unpredictable, might actually be the greatest weapon any civilization could have. The small boy who had cried alone in a broken pod, who had been raised by dragons in mountain sanctuaries, had become the savior of a world. And he was only getting started. 2 years after the machines fell silent, the Viridian Collective finally sent a ship to investigate. They had been monitoring the planet from a distance, watching the signals fade one by one as their terraforming constructs were systematically destroyed. It didn't make sense. The machines were designed to be unstoppable. They had been created by one of the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. Nothing should have been able to defeat them. Yet something had. The Viridian Command decided to send an expedition. They needed to understand what had gone wrong. They needed to know what had killed their machines. What they found when they arrived was not what they expected. The planet below was thriving. Cities that had been destroyed were being rebuilt. The sky, which had been filled with smoke and fire just months ago, was now clear and blue. Most shockingly, the different species that lived on this world, creatures that the Viridians had classified as hostile and incompatible, were working together. Dragons flew beside alien shuttles. Underground dwellers worked with surface dwellers. Energy beings and physical beings shared the same spaces. And at the center of it all was a human. The Viridian ship descended slowly, its landing bay opening to reveal beings of pure crystalline structure, their forms shifting and flowing like water frozen in time. They moved with the confidence of a species that had never been challenged, never been questioned, never been forced to doubt their decisions. They didn't know what was waiting for them. James stood at the meeting ground with Kale on one side and representatives from every species on the planet on the other. He was 30 years old now. His face was marked by scars earned in battles against impossible odds. His body was strong from years of training with dragons. But his eyes were what struck people most. They held the wisdom of someone who had lived through impossible things and learned from each one. "Welcome," James said simply when the Viridians emerged from their ship. "I'm James. You may not remember me, but you left me here. You left me to die." The Viridians exchanged glances. They accessed their historical records, searching for any mention of a human child. It took them several minutes to find the data. A damaged evacuation pod. An oversight. A child left behind during the crash of a research vessel. The files called it an acceptable loss. A necessary sacrifice. Just one infant among millions. "You survived," one of the Viridians said. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, expressed with the kind of flat certainty that came from beings who dealt only in facts and logic. "I did," James said. "But not because of anything you did. I survived because the dragons chose to save me. I survived because my family, a family you never thought I would have, took care of me. And I survived because humans are exactly what you said we were. Unpredictable. Volatile. Dangerous. You were right about all of that." The Viridians said nothing. They were analyzing, processing, trying to understand how a single human child could have somehow changed the course of history on this planet. "Your machines were killing everything," James continued. "The dragons tried to fight them with strength and honor. Other species tried to hide. But I did something different. I used the chaos inside me. The unpredictability you feared. I made the machines fight each other. I set traps that made no logical sense. I lied. I cheated. I broke every rule because the machines had been programmed to expect you to play by the rules." Kale stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow across the Viridian delegation. "This human is our brother. He saved our kind from extinction. He brought peace to a world that was dying. He is one individual," a Viridian stated. "One exception does not define a species." "No," James said quietly. "But I'm not an exception. I'm just a human. Everything I did, any human could do. We don't have your logic. We don't have perfect calculations. But we have something better. We have the ability to imagine things that shouldn't work and make them work anyway. We survive by doing the impossible." The Viridian ship's sensors scanned the planet below. The data was undeniable. The machines were gone. The world was united. Multiple species were cooperating at levels that should have been impossible. And at the center of it all was a human, leading dragons, respected by creatures the Viridians had never even attempted to communicate with. "You came here thinking you could write us off," James said. "You thought humanity was too broken, too chaotic, too dangerous to ever be part of your galactic community. But the truth is we're exactly what the galaxy needs. We're the species that thinks when everyone else follows patterns. We're the ones who find solutions in places solutions shouldn't exist." The Viridians fell silent. They were processing millions of calculations, running scenarios, analyzing probabilities. But those calculations meant nothing in the face of the simple reality standing before them. A human child they had abandoned had become the greatest leader their entire galaxy had produced. "You must choose," James said, and his voice was firm but not angry. "You can accept humanity as equals. You can accept that we have value, that our unpredictability is a strength, not a weakness. Or you can turn away again. But know this, you'll be turning away from the only species that will ever truly surprise you. The only species that will ever show you something you never calculated. The only species that might actually save you when your logic fails." Kale and the dragons moved closer, a wall of ancient power standing with a human. The other species did the same, creating a united front of beings that should have been enemies but had learned to work together. The Viridian delegation stood still for a long moment. Then, slowly, their leader stepped forward and extended what might have been called a hand. "We accept," the Viridian said. "Humanity is welcome in the galactic community." James smiled. The boy they had forgotten had just changed the future of the entire galaxy. His name was James. And he had saved them all. The end.